time when the ancient prophecies, foretelling great changes and upheavals in the world, began to be fulfilled. Where it still can be found, the serene and peaceful beauty of nature stands in calm contrast to the turmoil of the city streets. And, as the time fulfills, most of the world still knows very little about Edward Albert Meier, commonly known as Billy, a reclusive man living in a remote rural region of Switzerland. Like everyone else, Meier has his own ideas and opinions about the events of the day, including about the value of street demonstrations.
Es wird eigentlich nur Stunk gemacht, Terror gemacht und so weiter und so fort, Aufstände, aber es kommt nichts dabei raus, das wertvoll wäre, das etwas zum Wertvollen ändern würde. Bei den Demonstrationen, wie zum Beispiel jetzt hat es begonnen in Amerika an der Wall Street gegen die Bankers und das hat jetzt auch schon auf die ganze Welt übergegriffen praktisch. Und viele, die an solchen Demonstrationen teilnehmen, die wissen nicht mal, worum es eigentlich geht. Die realisieren das nicht. Die Menschen sind immer mit sich selbst beschäftigt, auf ihr eigenes Wohl aus und denken nicht weiter über das nach, was rundum geschieht. Nur das, was sie selbst betrifft.
As the time fulfills, there are those who have found Meier's work and who help this ordinary man fulfill an extraordinary mission as the guardian of the true spiritual teaching, the long-hidden ancient prophecies, and as the prophet of the new time. Today's rapidly unfolding events hold few surprises for Meier, who'd already foreseen many of them decades before. In fact, on February 3rd, 1948, while most people were concerned with many far less weighty matters, Meier had just published his first uncannily accurate warnings about the future when he was just 11 years old. He not only foretold life-destroying ray and vibrational weapons, but also the modern-day electronics technology and the coming environmental destruction that was undreamed of at the time. He foresaw man's early ventures into space and genetic engineering technologies. Again, all of this when he was only 11. Meier published his next prophetic warnings in 1951, when he was 14 years old.
Ich habe das erste Mal, als ich etwas gemacht habe, war 1951. Da habe ich das erste Mal Briefe geschrieben und rausgeschickt in die Welt an Regierungen, an Zeitungen, Journale und so weiter und so fort und habe gesagt, was die Zukunft bringt.
Indeed, Billy Meier was quite specific. More than 60 years ago, when he foretold the devastating environmental destruction now unfolding all around us, even specifically warning of unnatural climate change that would be due largely to human causes. He continued to publish his own prophecies over several decades while traveling through numerous countries, even while performing his duties as the Phantom. Meier apprehended serial killers and mass murderers for police departments in India, West Pakistan and Turkey.
Das noch mehrmals in den 50er Jahren getan und dann auch in den 60er Jahren und 70er Jahren auch von Indien her, von Pakistan her, von Afghanistan her.
But his warnings weren't heeded, and human beings often foolishly returned to the same dangerous paths, following false leaders after disasters struck.
Wenn irgendein Unglück geschieht, dann wird ein großes Tamtam gemacht, aber sobald das vorbei ist, flaut es wieder ab und geht in Vergessenheit. Der Mensch ist kurzdenkig. Er will sich auch nicht an solche Sachen erinnern.
In 1958, in a time of increasingly self-destructive human folly, Meier warned about the grave dangers of atomic energy and power plants, which more than 50 years later we still haven't heeded, despite Chernobyl and Fukushima, a disaster of such unrecognized magnitude that it will affect the world for generations to come, as the radioactive particles continue to spread unnoticed and largely unreported. As for our use of atomic energy in power plants, Meier is quite clear.
Atomkraftwerke sollten absolut rund die Welt strikte verboten sein.
What safe, non-polluting sources can meet our growing energy needs?
Die Menschen brauchen, dann müssen sie sich auf andere Dinge zurückgreifen, wie zum Beispiel auf die Erdhitze. Sehr tief in der Erde drin. Die Hitze hochnehmen und Turbinen betreiben und Energie schaffen, und das ist absolut schadlos. Und das hat keine Rückstände, die gefährlich wären für die Natur oder für die Menschen oder für die Tiere. Praktisch eine Energie, die endlos gebraucht werden kann.
Regarding claims that so-called free energy devices can solve our needs, Meier is a clear and unflinching realist.
Das mit der sogenannten freien Energie, das sind in der Regel nichts anderes als Fantasien, in der Regel nichts Reales. Wir leben in einer Welt der Wirklichkeit und wir müssen das machen, was uns die Wirklichkeit bietet. Das müssen wir nutzen. Und wenn wir die Wirklichkeit nutzen und nicht irgendwelchen Fantasien nachhängen, dann kommen wir sehr schnell weiter.
Meier has his own views about other controversial things, such as UFOs and extraterrestrials. In fact, his claims regarding UFOs have fascinated some people and seemed very unrealistic to many others.
Ja, was soll man dazu sagen? Natürlich, die Leute, die waren fasziniert wegen den Strahlschiffen, UFOs genannt, und viele davon waren schockiert. Andere, das sind irgendwelche Besserwisser oder Negierer und so weiter und so fort. Und das macht dann die Sache natürlich schwieriger zum Lernen, was eigentlich gelernt werden muss in Bezug auf Geisteslehre, in Bezug auf Wirklichkeit, Wahrheit und wirkliches Leben.
So what does the average person think about the likelihood of other intelligent life in the universe? Is that also a fantasy? If it really exists, how would it affect us?
Yeah, I'm sure there's something that exists in the universe, and we are not alone. It could mean that God doesn't exist.
Our ego will be hurt. We think we know how everything works. If something happens that completely changes that view, we'll be shocked.
It means to us to develop a new intelligence, a new kind of science, religion. Positive for science, but not negative for religion.
I think it would be negative for religions. Some people would reconsider.
Basically, it means we are screwed. If we are friends with them, it's not too bad because we're not in bad shape. But if you're not in good terms with them, then we probably have to put together all our smart brains and actually start thinking of how to make peace with them.
I don't think people would think of themselves as coming from various continents. Rather, we will see ourselves as coming from Earth, and it's this whole mentality of it's us versus them. Nationalities, country borders are not going to matter.
Quite shattering blow on a psychological level. We weren't as important as we thought we were. Probably be good and realise that we're just one small part of a bigger cosmos.
A big question that invites us to construct all kinds of quite elaborate fantasies. The real question to be asking is how best to cope with the fact that it won't meet our expectations.
I don't believe in any of it. I don't think there's anything out there because we'd know by now. There'd be scientific proof. Well, I suppose there's any chance. It's huge, so you never know.
Knowing the human race would probably start a war or something. I imagine they'd think of it more as a threat.
I actually think the government might have already found life.
I honestly do.
I just don't believe that there really is any real life. Like they might have think they found evidence, but I don't think that it actually.
So many conspiracy theories and I saw a dot in the sky.
Dots in the sky indeed. Meier has also provided more than mere conjecture about UFOs. In fact, he claims that for over 70 years he's been meeting with extraterrestrial human beings called Plejaren, who visit him in these ships. Claims of contacts have provoked intense criticism and attacks from skeptics. There have also been 22 documented attempts on his life, requiring him to take prudent steps to protect himself. Most people are also unaware that Billy Meier's still irreproducible UFO evidence has been analyzed and authenticated by scientific experts like Michael Horn from the Mars mission and numerous others. Regarding the likelihood of extraterrestrial life, consider the comments of a retired university physician with decades of practice and a background in the sciences.
The local solar system is one of probably several billion. Now, assuming the Big Bang Theory is correct, a planetary system to support life would require the same kind of genetic material that supports life on this planet, namely oxygen, a series of metals, water, the elements that are familiar to us because these are the elements that were generated by the Big Bang, burning hydrogen to form helium, and then more complex metals such as silicon. On up the periodic table, there are multi-billion galaxies that could support planetary systems similar to us. It's very likely that the DNA code that supports life on this planetary system exists elsewhere. Individuals who probably look fairly similar to the way we look and think would inhabit these systems. It seems very reasonable. Other life forces have visited this planet. There seems to be abundant evidence for that. Now, assuming that string theory is correct and that we do live in a multidimensional universe, probably wormholes do exist. How we're going to find them and utilize them as for time travel or to visit other galaxies has yet to be discovered.
As the time fulfills, small groups of people meet throughout the world to discuss Billy Meier's information and the spiritual teaching.
Of the whole thing is that the people who use their UFOs to come here, they're more advanced and they're here to teach us a thing or two. Everything is going to be on your shoulder.
You have to do the work yourself and nobody's going to do it for you. You have to be self-responsible and work on yourself and really understand what it is to be a human being in the real and true sense and change yourself towards that. That's a lot of work.
Meier claims to have regular meetings with the Plejaren extraterrestrials. We asked him when was the last time that he met with Ptah, said to be the leader of their race.
Hier, Moment mal, am 1. Oktober. Vorher eben am 10. September und jetzt am 1. Oktober. Ja, je nachdem, was anfällt. Weißt du, es sind auch Sachen, wo sie herkommen, die nicht in Kontaktberichten erscheinen. Aber da ist vom 10. September bis 1. Oktober ist nur diese zweimal hier gewesen. Das ändert sich. Es kann unter Umständen 2-3 Mal die Woche sein, wenn mal irgendwas anfallen tut, aber das ist schon lange her, dass das so gewesen ist. Heute ist es manchmal sehr lange Zeit zwischen dem einen und anderen Besuch.
There are other members of the Plejaren race with whom Meier says he also often meets.
Wer viel da gewesen ist die letzte Zeit, das war Florena und Enjana, die sind jeweils sonntags gekommen, jeden Sonntag, weil wir das Namenbuch korrigieren mussten. Und da habe ich ja keine Ahnung, wie die Namen geschrieben sind und ausgesprochen sind für das Namenbuch. Und was wollte ich jetzt sagen? Sag's mir schnell. Die Namen weiß ich eben nicht, wie sie geschrieben sind und das haben sie mir zeigen müssen, oder? Und wir sind noch nicht fertig damit. Jetzt nochmals eine Nachkontrolle machen, das ist reine Arbeit, die wir zusammen erleben. Sind also keine Kontaktberichte darüber. Wie sie betont werden, die Namen, etwa um die 12.000 Namen jetzt. Erst war das erste Buch hatte ja nur etwa 6.000, jetzt sind nochmals etwa 6.000 dazugekommen. Immer Männername, Frauenname und immer die Bedeutung, was der Name bedeutet.
For decades, the extraterrestrials have spoken to Meier about far more controversial matters. In 1953, while informing him about the ambitions of Russia, China, and the U.S. for global domination, Asket commented on still prevalent beliefs about Israel. We asked Meier about the so-called worldwide Jewish conspiracy.
Das ist genau dasselbe wie bei den Juden, denen wird auch angehängt, sie wollen die Weltherrschaft erringen. Das ist alles dummes Zeug. Auch in Israel, bei den Juden ist es so und auch rund um die Welt, die wollen Frieden haben. Und die Palästinenser, die wollen auch Frieden haben. Aber es hat halt eben jene Minderheit, die dauernd Feuer macht und Krieg schürt. Das ist in jedem Land so, weißt du, das sind parteienmäßig in der Regel aufgeteilt, da sind die Friedlichen und da sind die anderen, die Krieg wollen. Und die Krieg wollen, die sind immer die Mächtigeren. Die Frieden, Liebe, Freiheit und Harmonie wollen, die werden einfach niedergedrückt, die werden praktisch gegeißelt und sie haben keine Möglichkeit, das durchzubringen, was sie wollen, um Frieden, Freiheit, Liebe und Harmonie zu haben.
For a lot of people, religion is still probably easy and in the back of their minds, even though they may not be a member of a church, or that they still have this desire that there's some angel that's watching over them, or whatever, that some higher power is going to save them or look after them.
Or a mosque or a church that they can pay to buy the sins. Maybe. Yeah, this is something very difficult to put aside. I mean, if you do something wrong and you don't have a place to go to pay for it and feel not guilty, that's pretty hefty.
When you realize that the buck stops with oneself, I think that's one of the things with regards to spiritual teaching, is that the more you study it, the more you have to look at yourself, and the more you realize how much you're still stuck in belief. And getting out of belief is not so easy.
The Bible doesn't make any sense as it is, but if you look at it from the viewpoint that what was called the one God, that they had different names for, different descriptions for, were not just one being, it was several different extraterrestrial beings who had more knowledge, more power, and people couldn't understand the knowledge and the power, and so they thought, oh, this must be the God, they were saying they were gods, like some of them, like the Jehovah type.
When I was younger, that's one of the things I thought, well, this God must be rather schizophrenic, because he used to have different personalities. One time he's loving, and the next time he's just a psychopath. It's very difficult to find people, especially in the States, since 83% of the population, according to statistics, is religious. Chances are that even the people within the UFO community are religious, and if they are looking at this case, I think it's very difficult for them to come to the conclusion that it's true, because if it is true, then they also have to acknowledge all the other material that is there, which basically is very critical of religion and of all the other UFO cases that are more or less false. You cannot expect these people then to suddenly say, oh, we were wrong, Billy Meier was right, and there is no God and there is no heaven that we're going to go to after we die. And see all our relatives and whatnot.
Gut, also, das andere Problem ist das, die Menschen, die sind gläubig in irgendwelche Religionen, in irgendwelche Sekten und hängen diesen Dingen an, fürchten sich, etwas anderes zu tun als das, was ihnen die Religionen und Sekten vorschreiben. Aber solange Religionen und Sekten das Gegenteil sagen, es sei verantwortlich, sei ein lieber Gott oder Jesus Christus oder so, solange kann es nicht funktionieren. Sind es nur einzelne Menschen, die danach leben. Versuch mal zu übersetzen.
There he is, all nailed up in gold. That's gold Jesus for us.
Indeed, every religion rests on the illogical premise that what's in this book is true, because this book says it's true. And of course, each religion and each holy book and each God is the only true one. This is so patently foolish that it's inadmissible in any court of law, let alone a kindergarten classroom. While the contents of the Bible, upon which some people affirm oaths, is inadmissible as proof of anything, including the authorship of the book itself, the dated copyrighted books and documents, such as you are seeing here, are legally admissible proof that Billy Meier indeed published his scientific information well before official discovery or occurrence. But Meier's abundant physical evidence and volumes of easily verifiable, prophetically accurate scientific information require no belief and only clear, self-responsible thinking for us to understand. So what is it that prevents human beings from recognizing the errors of their ways? There is no blissful heaven or torturous hell other than that which we create for ourselves through our own thoughts, feelings, and actions. And there are no fearful demons or loving angels, spirit guides, or other imaginary beings tasked with guiding, guarding, or directing our lives. Ta-da! As we say goodbye to the age of beliefs and enter the age of truth and knowledge, we leave behind the vengeful guy in the sky and other imaginary gods, all of whom were based on the human extraterrestrials who were here long ago, lording it over the primitive Earth human beings.
Die Menschen müssen lernen, sich selbst zu sein, sich selbst zu entscheiden für irgendwelche Dinge, also selbst zu denken, selbst zu handeln in richtiger Art und Weise und müssen die Selbstverantwortung zu tragen lernen. Und darin ist auch verankert, für den Mitmenschen Mitgefühl zu haben, genauso wie für sich selbst und zu lernen, wirklich Mensch zu sein. Und ein wirklicher Mensch zu sein bedeutet, Liebe zu haben, Frieden zu halten, Freiheit zu haben und harmonisch zu sein. Die Geistlehre ist das Wichtigste, das es überhaupt gibt. Die Geisteslehre ist die Lehre der Wahrheit, ist die Lehre des Geistes, ist die Lehre des Lebens. Und die Geisteslehre lehrt den Menschen, wie er denken soll und wie dann seine Gefühle dementsprechend geformt werden und dann das Handeln, das daraus entsteht. Und aus dem Ganzen geht dann auch hervor, wie der Mensch leben soll, wie er richtig leben soll und sich richtig verhalten soll. Gäbe es eher viel zu reden darüber, bücherweise.
Billy Meier has written extensively in dozens of books about the spiritual teaching, which is completely non-religious and devoid of any beliefs, meaningless rituals, superstitions, or fearful obedience to an imaginary vengeful deity. It is the teaching of truth, of life, and of the spirit. The core element of the teaching is the focus on complete self-responsibility in all areas of one's life, without the need for any priests, rabbis, mullahs, gurus, or masters to depend on or to be subservient to.
With the teaching being one teaching, you realize that everything is interconnected.
The history that I have been taught in school did not make any sense because there were gaps. But with his material, there is no gap. They're interconnected. Connected like love. I wasn't brought up in a religious family, but the first, 5 years of school, we had to go to one religion class and we had to study Quran. That was all that I was exposed to Islam. Now, when Meier came up with the Goblet of Truth, I started reading this book. Yeah. And why is it that I like this so much? Because it makes sense. There's no nonsense in it.
Semyaze speaks of the creation, the actual all-powerful true source and sustainer of all that exists in this universe, and which created the evolving human spirit, the eternal, immortal spark of life, which is a tiny holographic piece of the creation itself, And this spirit, respectively the human spirit form, enlivens the material consciousness as well as the entire material body. A unity containing a balance of both positive and negative, necessary for evolution. Contrary to the false teachings of the religions, each and every human being is born absolutely free from any so-called sin. The creation has no chosen people, only begotten son or solitary prophet, and it doesn't take sides in wars or football games. All human beings are intrinsically of equal value, even while at different levels of evolution in their individual lives.
Is the fact that it evolves. It doesn't stop. It's like science.
Different confusing teachers out in the world, they just escape the question that the pupil or the interested has answered with a stupid statement or a stupid question back. They're not giving any answers with detail. When you come to the spiritual teachings from Billy, you get very detailed explanations. But if they take the time to look into the details of this and that and the other in this teaching, they see that it's all connected and it all makes sense. People somehow expect that a spiritual teachings, everybody should be able to understand it right away. But this is like any school, take nothing on belief, but always keep also an open mind to see this.
In the same situation with the teaching being one teaching, you realize that everything is interconnected.
Just how interconnected are we? What do most people really want?
Happiness. I think that's very important. Yeah, it's a bit cliche.
If you're able to do stuff that makes you happy, to be around people that make you happy, I think then it's all good. That's what people really want.
For me, I think it's important to have people around me that I care about. Maybe that's the most essential. It doesn't have anything to do with money, good job, or anything.
Happy, like whatever I do, wherever I go, like I just want to be happy, like be with my friends, go out. Like just the way of spending life, like I just want to be happy, that's it. Living life as if there is no tomorrow, just enjoy.
I don't want a big house, I don't want a car, I just want a studio flat where I can produce art. So that's sort of what justifies my existence, I think.
What's important for me in life, find happiness. Doesn't matter what you do. At the end of the day, you gotta have passion. Once you have achieved happiness in your life, you help spread happiness around the world.
Like it or not, there are some things that could ruin our day, such as this prophetic information from 1976 that warns of the looming fall of England and the dangers that the world, and especially the West, will face from the coming military aggression of Russia and China. In 1981, the Plejaren warned Meier about a danger from space that our planet will face from what they called the red meteor, which our scientists only officially discovered in 2004 and named asteroid Apophis. Meier was told that it would impact the Earth with certainty unless our scientists come together and deflect it from its course, preferably with an atomic explosion. We are advised not to destroy it, as it would rain down thousands of smaller pieces on the Earth. After we publicized this information, the chief of Russia's space program invited NASA, the European Space Agency, the Chinese Space Agency, and others to join an international project to deflect the Apophis asteroid from a possible collision with Earth in 2036, just 24 years from now. We publish this information in comic book form to catch the attention of the younger generation who would be most impacted by this event.
You plan for the worst, but you continue to do what you can do at the present. Things may or may not happen, or they may happen somewhere else. You may not necessarily be directly affected by these catastrophes. It's rather sad that we have all this information there and all the warnings, and nothing is being done by those who are in a position to be able to do something about it.
Of course, those in positions of power often do things that the public never knows anything about, as Billy Meier suggests here.
Wegen Apollo 11, da habe ich dann sowieso etwas ganz Besonderes. Die Apollo 11 Mission, das war ein Schwindel von A bis Z. Ist überhaupt nicht passiert. Die Mondlandung, der Mondflug ist nicht passiert. Das ist alles schaustellermäßig, filmmäßig ist das aufbereitet worden und nachher überspielt worden ins in Houston Zentrum, wie heißt das? Airspace Center oder wie das heißt. Dann ist alles da überspielt worden und alle, die mitgemacht haben, sind durch diese Filme betrogen worden. Haben auch nichts davon gewusst. So ist auch die ganze Welt übers Ohr gehauen worden. Und von all denen, die mitgemacht haben bei diesem Betrug, die sind alle durch Hypnose sind die dazu gemacht worden und haben dann falsche Erinnerungen, posthypnotische Erinnerungen und so weiter und so fort. Und die haben dann selbst daran geglaubt, dass sie das wirklich erlebt hätten. Die angeblich auf dem Mond gewesen sind. Ja, und die tragen ein Leben lang tragen die falsche Erinnerungen in sich. Und wenn jemand Gefahr bedeuten könnte von diesen Leuten, es sind nur noch eine kleine Handvoll jetzt vorhanden. Wenn die Gefahr bedeuten könnten, dann würden sie einfach durch irgendeinen Unfall sterben. Das war der erste Krampf, der erste Betrug. Der zweite Betrug fand dann 1970 statt. Und zwar, soll ich das jetzt wirklich sagen, da sind sie mit der Apollo 13 sind sie 6 Tage unterwegs gewesen. Und da hat es geheißen, auch alles manipuliert und alle unter Hypnose und Drogen und so weiter. Sie hätten einen Schaden gehabt, technischen Schaden an der Kapsel, an der Raumkapsel, hat man gesagt. Und seien, ohne dass sie hätten landen können, zur Erde zurückgekehrt. Die sind zurückgekehrt und haben gesagt, sie hätten keine Mondlandung durchführen können. Haben sie gesagt, was nicht stimmt. Es war eine Schnellaktion, die durchgeführt wurde. Die sind auf dem Mond gelandet. Und zwar genau dort, wo die Apollo 11 gelandet sein soll. Um die Sachen dort niederzulegen, die angeblich liegen geblieben sind und um Fußspuren zu machen. Und zwar in Voraussicht, dass im neuen Jahrtausend, also in dem wir jetzt leben, Amerikaner oder Chinesen oder Russen auf den Mond raufgehen und dann dort die Sachen finden und gesagt werden kann, Apollo 11 war also doch droben. Ja, doch, noch mehrere Male. Die waren an anderen Orten. Nein, auch Amerikaner. Alles mit der Apollo-Mission. Bis Apollo 11, 12, 13, 15, 16 oder 17. Apollo 16 oder 17 sind sie an mehreren Orten gelandet, nur nicht eben dort dann. Das ist das, was ich von da letzthin erfahren habe, als wir darüber gesprochen haben. Und eben, es war nur eine Schnellaktion. Die erste Aktion hat 8 Tage gedauert, angeblich mit Apollo 11. Und da war es dann 6 Tage als sogenannte Schnellaktion. Zeit genug, um zu landen, wieder wegzufliegen, alles zu präparieren auf dem Boden. Ja, ich muss mal gucken, wie der Ort geheißen hat. Das ist für 13, ja. Im Moment ist es noch nicht pleiadisch, ist immer noch irdisch, mein Computer.
Ja, okay.
11 gelandet haben soll. Mare tranquillitatis.
We asked Billy Meier this question regarding civil war in the United States, as mentioned in the Hanok Prophecies.
Das ist nicht nur in Amerika so, das ist rund um die Welt so. Das ist so und es schwappt auch über nach Europa und auf andere Länder. Das meiste, was wir in Europa haben, kommt immer von Amerika drüben. Das Gute wie das Böse.
Of course, it would seem preposterous to claim that in 1987, Billy Meier actually knew about the coming destruction of the World Trade Center by terrorists, as it states here in the Hanok Prophecies. It's true that they were only first available in 2002 after the attacks. But note that the information about the attack on the World Trade Center is in the Hanok Prophecies, the same document that warned of the coming Russian attack against the United States, Canada, and Scandinavian countries, such as Sweden, Norway, and Finland, which will originate from Arkhangelsk. Consider that these prophecies have been available in German since 2002 and online in English since 2006. Now, see these developments from July 2011 and June 2012 pertaining to Russian troop movements, to Arkhangelsk, and a Canadian troop response. We asked Billy Meier about these developments that seem to indicate that the time is indeed fulfilling.
Das ist richtig. That's right. Weißt du, es beginnt jetzt eine Phase, wo verschiedene Länder versuchen, die Pole zu erobern und das wird auch wieder Differenzen geben, die Pole, Nordpol und Südpol. Die wollen jetzt da droben Ländereien für sich schnappen, die Amerikaner, die Russen, die Kanadier, die Chinesen. Das gibt wieder große Differenzen. Das ist eben noch im Nordpol und Südpol sind noch viele Ressourcen vorhanden, oder? Und die wollen sie sich sichern. Aber ich weiß nicht, ob das schon begonnen hat, offiziell, oder ob es immer noch inoffiziell ist. Ich weiß nicht. Ich weiß es nicht, ob es offiziell oder inoffiziell bereits. Aber jedenfalls ist jetzt die Zeit, wo das kommen muss.
Scientific-based, common sense, cause and effect.
Cause and effect, exactly. So skeptics and other religious believers who attack Billy Meier's role as an authentic prophet deserve a response, but perhaps a more dignified one. Prophecies and predictions are made with calculations and projections based on known data through the understanding and application of the laws of cause and effect and the resulting interactions. Generally speaking, a small cause creates a small effect, larger causes create larger effects, which themselves are causes, and so on. Like the other true prophets before him, Billy Meier mastered these abilities through consciousness-based powers to accurately foretell future events. The following segment contains what we refer to as prophetically accurate information that was derived by time travel to see the actual future events or by observing previously unknown things that would only be officially discovered by our scientists much later. In 1978, Semyaze told Meier that Io was the most volcanically active body in the Jupiter system. Scientists were surprised to discover this phenomenon in March of 1979, 5 months after Meier published it. Semyaze also confirmed that there's a ring of Jupiter composed of sulfur ions, exactly as scientists also confirmed 5 months later. Meier stated that the Egyptian pyramids were built by free people and artisans, precisely what archaeologists discovered in 1991, 3 years later. Ptah told Meier that by the year 2100, seas will rise up to 160 centimeters, precisely what scientists determined in 2009, 3 years later. In 2001, Ptah described a technology to Meier whereby a signal is received at a destination before it is actually sent. In 2006, physicists proposed the possibility of reverse causation 5 years later. In 1987, Quetzal explained to Billy Meier that there were still mammoths living north of Russia 3,500 years ago, which scientists corroborated in 1993, 6 years later. In 2001, Billy Meier learned from Ptah that an eruption of Krakatoa in the 6th century resulted in a dust veil that lasted for months, as well as other worldwide changes. Scientists corroborated Meier's information in 2008, 7 years later. In 1983, Meier was told that scientists tracking Halley's Comet in 1991 would notice an immense dust cloud that would make the comet appear hundreds of times brighter, which is exactly what happened 8 years after Meier published the information. In 1987, Billy Meier learned that there was a gigantic dinosaur that was 45.9 feet long, precisely what was discovered by researchers in 1995, 8 years later. In 1987, Quetzal told Billy Meier that there were about 10,000 mummies and a lot of gold entombed in Bahariya, Egypt, that hadn't been discovered. That changed when Egyptian workers found the mummies and the gold in Bahariya in 1996, 9 years later. In 1988, Meier stated that neutrinos have mass and was informed by Quetzal that there are several types which can transform into one another. In 1998, Japanese and American physicists corroborated this information 10 years later. In 1991, Billy Meier was told that a 5,100-year-old Iceman mummy would be discovered in the mountains and that he died from the results of a fall and an arrow lodging in his back. The mummy was discovered several months later, and in 2001, scientists determined that he died from a skull injury and an arrow in his back. In 1994, Ptah told Meier that the incubation time for BSE, or mad cow disease, can range from 40 to 50 years, a figure very close to what scientists determined in 2006, 12 years later. In 1995, Meier learned that there is indeed a young planetary formation in the Pleiades, which scientists confirmed in 2007, 12 years later. In 1975, Billy Meier's third extraterrestrial teacher, Semyaze, told him that the deadly consequences to all life on Earth from increased damage to the ozone layer was related to ozone-destroying chemicals, such as bromine gases, as well as those that occur from internal combustion engines and atom splitting. In 1988, scientists confirmed the relationship between atom bomb testing and damage to the ozone, 13 years later. In 1992, scientists reported that the increase in ultraviolet light resulting from damage to the ozone layer was in turn damaging phytoplankton and consequently the entire food chain, 17 years later. Why haven't we been thinking deeply about Billy Meier's vitally important scientific information?
People are just looking for distractions. The more that they can look outside of themselves to distract themselves of what's really going on within themselves or inside.
In 1988, Billy Meier was told that the Centaurus A galaxy is actually a supermassive black hole. 13 years later, in 2001, scientists discovered a supermassive black hole at the center of Centaurus A. In 1976, Semyaze clearly stated that the extraction of oil and gas were among the man-made causes of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes, which is exactly what a scientist published in 1990, 14 years later. In 1987, Quetzal told Meier that scientists would discover a gigantic explosion at the center of galaxy NGC 4636 around the turn of the millennium, which they indeed announced in 2001, 14 years later. In 1987, Billy Meier reported that there is blue dust or other blue material on asteroid Eros, and that it also has thousands of large boulders, as well as a less than 3% chance of hitting the Earth. 14 years later, in 2001, scientists corroborated Meier's information. In 1987, Meier learned from Quetzal that sweat produces an antimicrobial antibiotic, which was officially discovered by scientists in 2001, 14 years later. In 1988, Meier learned that Leonardo da Vinci's mother was actually a slave girl from the Orient. In 2002, museum researchers discovered that she was a slave and believed that she came from the Middle East, 14 years later. In 1988, Quetzal confirmed Meier's observation that atmospheric pressure changes along with a fine wind occurred during the solar eclipse, and stated that earthly climatic conditions as well as solar and lunar influences were involved. In 2002, scientists observed changes in atmospheric pressure and noted solar and lunar influences 14 years later. In 1988, Billy Meier learned that a wandering black hole is traveling through the Milky Way at a distance of 6,000 light-years, the exact same information that scientists first reported in 2002, 14 years later. In 1989, the real cause of the extinction of the Mayans, climate change and resulting droughts, was explained to Meier by Quetzal. National Geographic caught up with Meier, reporting the same findings in 2003, 14 years later. In 1979, Semyaze told Billy Meier that a small moon, which was once a comet, would explode into 20 pieces and crash down on Jupiter between the 10th and 25th of July in 1994. Ptah later confirmed that the object was known as Shoemaker-Levy, which indeed broke up into 20 pieces and crashed into Jupiter between July 16th and July 22nd, 15 years after Meier was first told about it. In 1987, Quetzal informed Billy Meier that in 2002 it would be officially known that an attempt to transfer spinach genes into pigs was made in Japan. Not surprisingly, the Japanese proved Meier's extraterrestrial sources to again be impeccably accurate. In 2002, of course, 15 years later. In 1987, Quetzal informed Meier that the actual color of the universe is beige, which many people think can be worn with almost anything. 15 years later, in 2002, scientists corroborated this information. In 1987, Billy Meier received detailed information about a Celtic sacrificial bowl made of gold, decorated with designs and weighing 10 kilograms that would be discovered in a Bavarian lake. Those exact details were confirmed when that object was discovered in 2002, 15 years later. In 1987, Quetzal specifically stated that in January 2002, an asteroid a few hundred meters across would cross the Earth's orbit at a distance of little more than 500,000 kilometers, all of which turned out to be exactly correct 15 years later. In 1992, Billy Meier was told that a father's tobacco addiction can harm the health of his offspring, which was corroborated by scientists in 2007, 15 years later. In 1987, Meier reported that there was a prehistoric giant rodent that was the size of a cow. It may now come as no surprise that in 2003, scientists discovered the skeleton of that creature, which they compared in size to a cow 16 years later. In 1987, Quetzal told Billy Meier that Stonehenge was used as an execution site, which is what archaeologists discovered in 2003, 16 years later. In 1989, Billy Meier learned that dark matter definitely exists and is responsible for a certain form of anti-gravity. These and other related elements that Quetzal explained to Meier were confirmed in 2006, 17 years later. In 1988, Meier spoke about fine dust particles, which he called aerosols, as being necessary for raindrops to form. In 2006, scientists confirmed both the process and the term aerosol, 18 years later. In 1988, Meier stated that black holes attract matter into themselves from magnetic fields, exactly as scientists reported in 2006, 18 years later. In 1987, Meier learned that the large predatory dinosaurs hunted the enormous plant-eating dinosaurs in packs, which is precisely what research scientists concluded in 2006, 19 years later. In 1990, Meier said that black holes eject matter from which new stars develop and subsequently create new galaxies from later explosions. 15 years later, in 2005, scientists discovered that black holes can create new stars and lead to the formation of new galaxies. Further scientific support emerged in 2009 for black holes building galaxies, 19 years later. In a 1988 interview, Billy Meier explained that the AIDS epidemic originated in Africa, then spread to Haiti, and from there to the rest of the world. In 2007, researchers came to the same conclusions 19 years later. In 1982, Quetzal told Meier that Italian banker Roberto Calvi didn't commit suicide but was strangled, and that Meier was to remain silent about it for 20 years, which is exactly when it was publicly announced. In 1986, Quetzal explained that the sun plays an important role in the phenomenon of polar lights. Scientists corroborated this in 2006, only 20 years later. In 1986, Meier was told by Quetzal that the huge eruption of Santorini long ago produced 73.6 cubic kilometers of ash and generated gigantic tsunamis, exactly as scientists found in 2006, 20 years later. In 1989, Meier was informed that the so-called trophy heads of the Nazca people were from sacrificial killings of enemies and people in their own population. Scientists came to similar conclusions in 2009, 20 years later. In 1989, Quetzal explained to Billy Meier that the hats on the tops of the heads of the giant Easter Island statues were transported by machines fashioned from the local palm wood. Archaeologists later theorized the use of trees in 2009, 20 years later. In 1989, Quetzal told Billy Meier that test tube conception involves great risks and dangers, including cerebral damage. In 2010, scientists reported that in vitro fertilization or test tube conception could double the risk of cerebral palsy 21 years later. In 1987, Quetzal told Meier that some petroleum is produced by natural processes inside the Earth, as scientists confirmed in 2009, 22 years later. In 1987, Quetzal explained to Billy Meier that the Earth's magnetism plays an important role in affecting climate change. In 2009, Danish scientists concluded the same thing 22 years later. In 1981, Meier was told about a unique solar system in which planets had 3 suns. Scientists discovered just such a system for the very first time in 2005, 24 years later. In 1978, Meier learned from Quetzal that a missing airplane from Ecuador had crashed into Mount Chimborazo at around 6,000 meters, which was confirmed in 2003, 25 years later. In 1985, the Plejaren extraterrestrials confirmed for Billy Meier that Hitler was a Jew, which DNA tests corroborated in 2010, 25 years later. In 1981, Meier was told that Halley's Comet actually originated in deep space, which scientists agreed with in 2010, 29 years later. In 1976, Meier learned from Semyaze that the outer stratum of the planet Mercury was contracting due to its metal core. Scientists finally caught up with Meier's information in 2008, a mere 32 years after he first published it. In 1976, Meier learned from Semyaze that Mars has more water than scientists assume, even while having a contrary to life nature. NASA confirmed water on Mars and the presence of a harsh chemical in the soil in 2008, 32 years later. In 1976, Semyaze explained to Billy Meier that the red hats on the top of the gigantic Easter Island statues were produced in a small volcano crater from which they were then moved. Archaeologists discovered that exact volcano crater in 2009, 33 years later. In 1976, Semyaze told Meier that a several meters in diameter planetoid exploded into 2 parts and crashed into the Atlantic Ocean, penetrating the Earth's crust at the bottom of the sea. Scientists officially discovered what they termed the fried egg and its companion crater in 2009, 33 years later. In 1975, Semyaze told Billy Meier that Earth's gravity slowed down the rotation of Venus and that it began rotating in the opposite direction as a result. In 2010, a French scientist calculated that the Earth was indeed having such an effect, some 35 years after Meier verifiably published the information. In 1976, Billy Meier also learned that Mars has faunic and floric forms of life. In 2012, scientists stated that it is 99% certain that there's life on Mars, 36 years later. As we pointed out earlier, Billy Meier was the first person to specifically warn of unnatural climate change in 1948 and 1951, and climbing climatic warming in 1958, along with all sorts of dramatically destructive environmental damage due to man-made causes, such as we are beginning to experience now. In 2012, the thick veil of denial began to lift as scientists started to acknowledge this inescapable reality. Some 54 years later, will we finally be both wise and responsible enough to act upon these clear and accurate warnings to assure our own future survival? While this is only a small amount of the already scientifically corroborated information, it should be sufficient to dispel all doubts as to the genuineness of Billy Meier's extraterrestrial contacts and the impeccable accuracy of the information.
Definitely want to meet him someday.
Of course, I want to know what kind of communication in between them, so that we can also learn from.
Probably we can have a talk with the guys from the outer space.
The religions and sects have long concealed one of the most profound secrets. It is not an imaginary, non-existent, outside force that determines and rules our daily lives. We create our world through our thoughts, feelings, and actions. It is up to us alone to determine our destiny. And it begins by recognizing and learning how to apply the might of thoughts. This is one of the most suppressed truths.
Wenn der Mensch von den Religionen und Sekten wegkommt und Wirklichkeit in seinen Kopf reinbringt, die Sachen so real und wahrheitsmäßig sieht, wie die Wirklichkeit ist, dann ändert sich auch langsam der Mensch zum Besseren. Wenn der Mensch einmal so weit kommt, dass er versteht und nachvollziehen kann, dass er selbst für alles verantwortlich ist, was er macht, was rund um ihn herum geschieht, dann ist der Punkt erreicht, wo der Mensch zu denken beginnt und sich alles bessert.
And now, as the world slowly learns more about Billy Meier, as we go about our busy lives, we still have the opportunity to awaken and heed the prophetic warnings and to rewrite what will otherwise become a regrettably tragic future history. We are invited to see the creation in all things, in all people, to observe nature so as to understand its laws and appreciate its beauty and perfection, and hopefully to learn from even its most lowly creatures how to cooperate with each other for our mutual benefit. These are our choices to make, if we want to, as the time fulfills. These are our choices to make, if we want to, as the time fulfills.
Das mit den Illuminati, das ist reine blanke Verschwörungstheorie. Es gibt heute die Illuminati noch, aber das sind wenige Menschen, wirklich wenige Menschen. Und die haben keine Ambitionen, um Weltherrschaft zu erlangen, wie ihnen zugesprochen wird. Das sind eigentlich rein militärische Aspekte. Also militärisch-politisch. Da fragt es sich immer, wer dann von den Militären ans Ruder kommt, wer die Macht ergreifen kann und was dann daraus geschieht. Nein, das ist an und für sich keine Bedrohung. Was die Bedrohung ist, das ist das Militär selbst mit ihren kriegerischen Handlungen. Die Gefahr wird erst dann, wenn das Ganze, was erforscht wird mit geheimen Fluggeräten, wie man eben sagt, UFOs, unbekannte Flugobjekte, wird es erst gefährlich, wenn sie eingesetzt werden in militärischen oder geheimdienstlichen Belangen. Also Menschen sollen keine Angst haben davor.
By the time that most people see this film, the American people will have made their choice in the presidential election of 2012. The following may prove to be of interest in retrospect. We asked Billy Meier if he thinks that President Obama follows the same path as previous presidents.
Folgt in dieser Beziehung nur dem in gleiche Richtung, was ihm von anderen diktiert wird, vom Senat und von den Militärs und Geheimdienst und so weiter. Okay. In dieser Linie folgt er den anderen Präsidenten nach, weil er keine andere Möglichkeit hat. Da stehen, der Senat steht im Hintergrund, Militär, Kongress und Wirtschaftsbosse. Und das, was er wirklich verwirklichen will, da werden ihm Steine in den Weg gelegt. Das, was wirklich gut ist, was er verwirklichen will. Könnte Präsident Obama das machen, was er in seinem Kopf an Ideen hat, dann würde alles sehr viel besser. Aber da sind zu viele machtvolle Gruppen in Amerika, die gegen das schaffen, weil sie dann weniger Geld verdienen würden, weniger Krieg führen könnten, weniger wirtschaftlich Profite machen und so weiter. Leider.
In May 2012, Billy Meier asked Ptah for his assessment of Mitt Romney. At the very end of the film, The Silent Revolution of Truth, there's a puzzling photograph of Billy Meier taken in India in 1964. The reporter who saw it and many of Meier's earliest UFO photos taken at the time mentions the photograph in this article from the New Delhi Statesman newspaper. Taken with a Kodak Bellows camera made in the late 1940s, this clear daylight photograph shows Meier sitting on the ground with a white cross in the sky above his head. We are told that the cross was actually a hologram generated by Ascot, Meier's extraterrestrial teacher at the time. The clue to the meaning of the photograph may be found in the information pertaining to Emmanuel, the prophet whose name was falsely changed to Jesus Christ, a man who never existed at all. The true story of Emmanuel reveals that while he was indeed crucified, he survived the crucifixion and, along with various family members and friends, ultimately made his way to India, where he lived, married an Indian woman who bore him numerous descendants, and where he died at well over 100 years of age. In fact, there is much information about a tomb and a shrine built around it in Srinagar, India, where a prophet was once buried who bore crucifixion marks on his feet. Emmanuel was the fifth prophet in a lineage that would ultimately have a seventh and final prophet. We know the six prophets as Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, and Muhammad. The Meier material points out that the teaching of all of these prophets was corrupted and falsified so as to form religions for the purpose of controlling human beings. So in this photograph, taken in India where Emmanuel died, we have the cross, which is the symbol commonly associated with the fictitious personality of Jesus Christ, based on Emmanuel, and in the foreground we have Meier, the seventh and final prophet, who bears the same reincarnated spirit as all of the previous six prophets. The existence and truth about Emmanuel was all but completely expunged by the religions in their Bibles. Nonetheless, brief mentions of him with alternative spellings of his name are found in the Old Testament, in Isaiah 7:14, and in the New Testament, in Matthew 1:23. Eventually, thinking people will put together the clues and discover the shocking truth. Unfortunately, this will come too late for the many millions of people who've been killed and persecuted in the name of a man-God who never existed. As the time fulfills, the great tragedy is that the Jews and Christians and Muslims are still waiting for their Messiah, Savior, or Mahdi to appear, while not realizing that the real truth is already here, brought by the real prophet, and also not realizing that they are letting the most important knowledge of all time pass by unnoticed in their present life. Since he neither looks nor acts like some holy person or savior, and certainly not how the so-called second coming is supposed to look, the truth is effectively hidden in plain sight from the non-prying eyes of sleepy humanity.
Wir haben einfach so viel wie möglich zu arbeiten und zu tun, die Sachen verbreiten, die Dinge verbreiten, die Lehre verbreiten, dass so viele Menschen wie möglich das hören und zu denken beginnen, zu lernen beginnen. Dann ist es wie Tropfen auf Tropfen oder wie eine Schneeballschlacht. Aber das braucht sehr lange Zeit. It needs very, very long time. Es sind sehr viele Menschen auf dieser Welt, es sind jetzt im Gegensatz zu dem, was behauptet wird durch die Statistik, sind über 8 Milliarden Menschen. Und eine sehr große Masse von diesen Menschen will Frieden haben und Harmonie und Freiheit haben. Aber es ist in unserer Welt eben so, dass die Minorität der Masse Menschheit mehr Macht hat als das Gros. Und diese Minorität bestimmt, was auf der Welt geht und läuft. Also auch Krieg und Terror und alles Mögliche. Was bei den Religionen und Sekten ist, sind die Faktoren die, dass den Menschen gepredigt und missgelehrt wird, dass sie an einen Gott und an Götter und Engel und Geistliche und so weiter glauben sollen, nur nicht an sich selbst. Und darum leben sie nur den Religionen nach das, was ihnen dogmatisch vorgeschrieben wird. Und dann haben sie Angst, von dem abzuweichen. Dann fürchten sie sich der Wirklichkeit und deren Wahrheit sich zuzuwenden. Das wird dann auch gelehrt, wie der Mensch zusammenleben soll mit seinen Mitmenschen, in friedlicher, freundlicher, harmonischer, liebevoller und freiheitlicher Art und Weise. Und auch mit der Natur und mit der Tierwelt und der Natur und dem Planeten Sorge zu tragen. To be helpful for the nature.
Our mission is to spread the truth about the creation and the spiritual teaching, knowing that we carry out our duty with modesty, in solidarity with, and respect for all life, seeking friendship and treating each member of humankind with equality.
the same yearning. Few of us asked to know more. Now we've laid all our cards on the table. We declared what we've got at the gate, and the ones who survive must be able to salvage their love from the hazards of fate. Who will light the way? Who will be the light? Who will light the way? Who will shine tonight? Everybody on board's getting restless, suddenly sensing the storm. Oh, the tempests are coming to test us, while we're hot, thirsty, tired and torn. Wild waves beat and batter our vessel, wicked winds rip our sails apart, but our spirits refuse to be broken, and all that remains is a matter of heart. Who will light the way? From a faraway land, or could it just be the reflection of all the brave hearts who have taken a stand? Taken a stand. Who will light the way?